together, notice a pattern here, and says to them, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin." In the same way, Jesus says, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels and of God over one sinner or one person who's lost their way, who repents and is brought back, brought close. Parable number 3. Arguably the most popular, well-known parable of all that Jesus told. The story of the prodigal son. One of the sons asks his father, even before he dies, for half of his inheritance early. Brad Long talked this story out in week 1 of the series, describing the heart of God. He just so wants to welcome us back. The son who takes the inheritance spends it all on wild living, the story tells us, on prostitutes. And he wakes up one morning sleeping in a pig's pen, in a pig farm, and he's lost everything. And he says, maybe I can go back home and beg my father to take me back as a servant. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. And he ran to him with compassion and hugged him and embraced him and welcomed him back. The son said to his father, "Father, may I just be a servant?" And he's like, "Are you kidding me? You're my son. And you're home, you're back." But the father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he is found." In all 3 stories, they end with a feast, a party, described as God celebrating those who are broken or lost their way or far from God, who've been brought back or brought close. Okay, so that's great. That's great. It's good to know that God is good and He's forgiving. And I grew up in the church and I'd hear these stories told and I thought, wow, that's really good that God is merciful and He's good to me. I hope He does this with my friends. I hope He reaches out to and chases down and seeks out and loves and puts on His shoulders the people around me, or the people around me who've made mistakes or are lost. And I just had sort of this image of Jesus sort of floating invisibly around the planet, just sort of like, "You, I want you, come to church. Come be, a Christian." And that randomly people just sort of, they were born into a certain family or God got their attention somehow. Well, in chapter 14, which is where we're going to spend the remainder of our time this morning, Jesus puts into context how this happens, how the lost sheep, the disconnected from God, those who have lost their way, are brought close to God. In preparing for this talk today, Tim Grimes, he knew I was talking about, he sent me a quote from Erwin McManus. Erwin is a pastor in LA, and I'm actually in a network along with him. I'm a part of some conference calls that happen throughout the month, and just a great, great church pastor. Anyway, it was really fascinating to see this when Tim emailed this to me. This is in one of Erwin's books. People ask, what is God's will for my life? It's as if the whole cosmos, the whole universe revolves around me. We need to stop asking, what is God's will for my life, and start asking, God, what is your will for human history? And how do I get my life aligned with your will? If we would just stop and open the scriptures and open our hearts, we would find enough of God's will to fill our entire day. And in doing this, we encounter Him. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh God, the economy or the crime or my job or this possible layoff or my relationship, or you got to fix that. God cares about all of these things. But we've got to be careful. If our interaction with God, if our view of Him is to answer our own immediate crisis, we start on the trajectory of believing that God is all about me. And we quickly become disengaged from the daily real activity of God in our world, where we feel Him and we see Him in our lives, because we think God's come just to interact with me and to save my job or to save my crisis or the parenting problem or the... When we keep this eye that God did send His Son for you, but then in His amazing, redemptive way of restoring you, He immediately says, now, you who are found, you who are restored, are now part of my work. To heal a broken world, to heal fragmented humanity. So in chapter 14, Jesus sort of really spells this out and really nails this. Like, how does His most passionate work occur on the earth? One Sabbath day, Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee. So here are the Pharisees, these arrogant religious people who believe they're the closest to God. They're the example of being close to God. They know the Old Testament scriptures. And the truth is, Jesus is countering their claims and exposing that they're actually further from God than anybody else in their arrogance. So he's in the home of this prominent Pharisee. He was being carefully watched by the rest of the Pharisees. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. It's a condition, a disease called dropsy. So Jesus asks the Pharisees and experts in the Old Testament law,